Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great. I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and today we're coming at you with this week in cannabis news from January 8th to the 14th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it, as it helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. Try to think of these videos as a time capsule. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the U.S. cannabis industry, identify top U.S. MSOs that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now based on their current market caps and new markets opening up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready, if you wish to do so, of course pending whatever incremental reform we're supposed to get from now until the 2024 election. But unless you live off the grid, I'm sure you're well aware of the great news that we got on Friday as the redacted document was released and the federal government officially acknowledges cannabis as the medicine that it is. And so, damn, does that ever feel good and vindicating after all this time? And we really have to give a massive thanks to Matt Zorn at On Drugs Media for doing all this legal work behind the scenes. While we've been in our little bubble, no one knows this is happening really except us, but happy to be aware and early. And so the timeline, I don't know what's next. This is the best sort of summary I could find, and so figured from GreenWave advisors, who I'm sure have done the research. What's next? The DEA opinion. Again, timeline is not certain, but that's supposed to be coming. Comment period, guidance from Garland memo, and FDA involvement. And so the last thing we want to do is get ahead of ourselves. What is giving people the reason to believe that a DEA opinion could be imminent? I'm not exactly sure. It's purely speculation, but just wanted to share a few things I found from Do the Right Thing, sharing This Guy Gets It. Looks like it's from Reddit. Apparently, HHS had an opportunity to file an opposition by Jan 18th to keep the court case going back and forth, then let the judge decide. Now, from my understanding, it's the 13th. They could still do it, right, before the 18th. And legally, they would want to keep this redacted until the final decision if they wanted to appeal and keep it going back and forth, right? And so the fact that it's been released unredacted is a pretty strong indication the full decision is already made and coming. Again, when, we don't know, out of our control, plan accordingly for your own situation, but would be highly irregular just to give in without an argument and say, sure, I'll just give you what you want. And so all these links will be in the comments, but also found this from Cannabis Business Times, highlighting what came midweek is that the DOJ official says HHS will release unredacted cannabis rescheduling recommendation letter. We didn't know when this was going to come, but fortunately it came pretty quickly after this announcement. And so just to highlight, reiterating that they have until the 18th of January, HHS, this is, I believe, to respond still. But just to highlight, this could mean, by the way, that rescheduling is imminent or not. Adding a footnote that a Federal Register notice announcing rescheduling would attach the letter and its enclosure. But so main thing is that it should be coming. Just for everyone saying that it's imminent, I don't think there's really evidence. But the fact that the unredacted letter is out does signal that the DEA announcement in agreement with HHS will be coming at some point. And that is fucking awesome. But time for a reality check. As a reminder, 2024 is going to be very interesting and entertaining. This is a clip from the Dime podcast with Matt Zorn from admin.law. I just figured out that those are both his accounts. And so, long story short, when we think that the science coming out and highlighting, that the federal government's been wrong this whole time and they want to right those past wrongs and cannabis ought to be accessible, safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative, is it naive for anyone to think that, these prohibitionists are just going to stop doing what they're doing and they're not going to double down? And I want to steal this recent quote from Cat Williams on the Club Shay Shay podcast because it's too perfect for this context, but we cannot let losers, just like the prohibitionists, continue to rewrite history like they have been. So it's a great reminder that it's not the time to sit back and relax, but we need to keep pushing forward until we get this over the finish line because they're going to double down, and we know they're wrong.
You do not get engaged, put your resources, I'm talking about your time and your money and your knowledge, your freaking network behind this, it won't happen.
Skin in the game,
baby.
The
other side, Kevin Sabet and Smart Approaches to Marijuana, do not have any doubt about the fact that they are mobilizing already. We know this, right? We're on their freaking email feed. We see what they're doing. They're already preparing for litigation. So it's time, people. You can't sit still and let this and just think you're entitled to. And what really bothers me is not only does everybody act like they're entitled to it, should have already happened and all this, they also act like it may not even be a good thing. It doesn't dawn on them that Kevin Sabet and Smart Approaches to Marijuana, the very fact that they're mobilizing and putting all of their resources to oppose this speaks volumes.
Yes, it does.
If you're opposing this, you're on Kevin Sabet's side.
And you're following the political science. Nothing scientific about it. And so if you wanted to tune into the whole thing, I believe only the audio is available until next week. Then I think the YouTube or the video, at least version, will be out. But links will be in the comments. I have not been able to listen to this or go through the whole document, though I want to try and read some of the document later today. Some of my weekend reading. There's just so much happening so fast, I'm not going to complain. But so for a bit of a summary of Zorn versus HHS, a link to the docket is below if you want to read on the motion. I'll put the link in the comments, but just wanted to share this here if you wanted to pause to read and go through it. And so, again, thank God for a lawyer just standing up and doing something that's easy for him in his niche and gets us this far. And so with that, just to highlight, Kevin's going to be looking for a new job soon. Any takers? We want that to be the case, but he's probably not because they're likely to just double down, which is even sadder. Again, speaks volumes about them. But it's just happy to highlight that after the announcement, millions of kids are seeing this irresponsible headline on Instagram today. One that is directly counter to the published research that my sugar daddies give me to memorize out there, showing today's cannabis is more dangerous than ever. It's hysterical at this point. You can't even feel bad for him. And so, obviously I'm blocked, so I can't continue to troll him like I wish I could, but found this from connoisseurs.io, and it highlights that how little it costs for these losers to sell out Americans like that. They're brothers and sisters. It's pathetic. It's not that much money. Obviously, it's a nice cushion, but Sam Inc., the anti-cannabis lobbying org ran by Kevin Sabet, has filed IRS Form 990 for tax year 2021. Kevin Sabet raked in $154K. Slickback greaseball Luke Niferatos raked in $122K, working 20 hours a week, spreading propaganda and bullshit professionally. You cannot make this up. A lot of money in the lobbying and the fake medical industry. But full link in the comments if you want to go through that. But just wanted to share that while we think their job's going away, they're likely still going to get funded and they're likely still going to be doing what they're doing. We just have to be better at them and make sure the truth prevails. And so this is the full document for the HHS release, 252 pages of it. You can download it here. All these links, again, will be in the comments. But with that, I wanted to get into the juice, the state sales news, because why not? It's the good stuff that we like to see. Highlighting the state growth story is alive and well. So out of Illinois, updated as of January 11th, 2024, I said that December would beat 150 million. What do we see? 153.9. Of course, just kind of the trajectory. It was easy to make that call, but happy to share that December jumped massively from 3.7 million items sold in November to 4.2 million items, 117 million from in-state, 36 million from out-of-state for total 153.9. So we'd love to see that as more and more dispensaries are rolling out, as those social equity entrepreneurs in Illinois are finally getting the shops that they were promised a long, long time ago. And so this is a Chicago Sun-Times article on the progress in Illinois. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on it as I've covered a lot of Illinois' progress over the year. You can pause to read if you're interested, but there's a snippet at the bottom I did want to bring it down to because it seems like as of right now, there's 177 rec dispensaries now in Illinois, obviously helping soothe that bottleneck, with 67 social equity dispensaries opened. Now I believe there's supposed to be like 180 or 190 social equity ones, so there's still many more that's supposed to come. And on top of that, it looks like another 188 social equity applicants are in the process of being licensed again. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm getting out of that. So love to see more and more dispensaries, which will help drive more legal sales as opposed to gray market ones. Well, out of Maryland, one of the newer markets to go online, all-time high, 7% growth from November. This year, Santa's hottest items were squishmallows and pot, whatever that means. But love to see this jump, 55.9 million from November up to 61.5 million in December. And so read it and weep. Since July, when Maryland launched for adult use as well, people want to vote for legal cannabis with their dollars. And so a bit more on Maryland from CBS News. Cannabis sales more than double 6 months after rec legalization in Maryland. And so, again, not going to spend too much time on the details, but invite you to pause to read if you don't know, and then full link in the comments if you did want to grab the link and go through it yourself. Well, wanted to share how Missouri, another one of the hottest 2023 markets, and how they've managed to flourish in year one, highlighting that 205 dispensaries in the state helped them reach 1.2 billion during the first 11 months of rec sales in Missouri. And so summary right there, not going to play this clip at all, but the link is in the comments if you want to go through that because we've got a lot of stories to try and get through, but happy to share that it's just record sales across the board. What do you know, folks? Connecticut cannabis sales hit record 27.55 million in December 2023, up 1.86 million from November. Quite impressive for a state with such a small population. And so further breakdown here if you wanted to pause to read, but love seeing that jump from 15.3 to 17.1, while from High Times, Maine's 2023 adult use cannabis sales topped 200 million. Saw 217 total in sales 2023. Although falling prices may be an indication of trouble to come, for the state's licensed operators, well, that's good for the consumer and anyone living and needing cannabis in Maine. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read if you're interested specifically in Maine. But as I mentioned, just kind of sharing the juice with you. All the links are in the comments if you want to go through them in deeper detail. Arkansas cannabis sales set new annual record in 2023 as well with 283 million in transactions. The state's 38 dispensaries finished the year strong with 25.6 million in December sales and another 23.3 million in November. And so love to highlight that the markets are flourishing when provided the opportunity to give a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative to Americans. And so from Florida, connoisseurs.io weekly update from January 5th to the 11th. We can see the flower market share leaders, THC market share leaders, CBD market share leaders, and total dispensary count. Now, the main thing, qualified patient count, continues to jump up week over week. I'm not really tracking that as closely as I used to, but up to 868,690. Looks like Fluent is the only dispensary to open a new location this past week. But main thing is I'll show you the visuals. And so for those interested, total flower sales by company in ounces just this past week alone. Pause to read. Total THC sales by company in milligrams this past week alone. Move a lot of cannabis. Total CBD sales by company this past week alone. And then dispensing locations by company. It's going to be a behemoth once that gets on the 2024 ballot and flips this year. Oh, can't wait. And so just wanted to share a lot of the headlines that we saw in response to the Friday news. So, of course, from Marijuana Moment, always somewhat friendly. Feds released cannabis documents confirming Schedule 3 recommendation based on accepted medical use. Love that the federal government is acknowledging that cannabis has medicine. So more here if you wanted to pause to read. But yeah, federal health officials said their review found that more than 30,000 healthcare professionals across 43 U.S. jurisdictions are authorized to recommend the medical use of cannabis for more than 6 million registered patients for at least 15 medical conditions. So how can that stay in the Schedule 1? Well, there's over 30,000 studies too that give reason for the recent announcement and what we're expecting to come this year. And so from MJBizDaily, unsealed rescheduling letter, cannabis less harmful than other drugs. And we love that a lot of the report, again, I've seen clips. I haven't been able to go through the whole thing myself, and I'm probably not going to read all 252 pages, but I'm going to try and skim through it. And they highlight that alcohol is clearly more harmful than cannabis. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read MJBizDaily's take. But more importantly, I wanted to share some of the mainstream outlets that, fortunately, even though it's Friday night at 7 p.m., did publish news that was somewhat positive. As federal scientists conclude, there is credible evidence for certain medical uses of cannabis. So this came 9:40 p.m. Friday yesterday. Clearly they want to bury this. And it's funny seeing Nat Svertig on Twitter thinking why would they want to bury this? I guess cannabis can only be a medicine when the government tells me that it is, right? Right? And so from New York Times, I think this one was behind a paywall and I don't have access, but if it's the right one, Todd Harrison sharing from New York Times. And again, 7:02 p.m. Friday night. They don't want to publish this during the week. They want to try and bury it. And so not ideal that is the case, but that's just the propaganda machines doing their thing at this time. At least the nice thing is that they are reporting the truth. In these cases, as FDA scientists have recommended that federal government remove cannabis from its most restrictive category of drugs. Even CNN, right? Hard to fathom. CNN published it at 9:28 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Here, where'd this title go? Oh yeah, cannabis meets criteria for reclassification as lower risk drug. FDA scientific review finds. You cannot make this shit up though. So trying to bury it, but there's a lot of reason to believe that the DEA is going to, of course, agree at this point. It'd be silly for them to go along all this way and then all of a sudden just not be in sync with the rest of the Biden admin. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read, or I'll scroll down a bit more. Otherwise, grab the full link if you want to go through it. But again, seeing these mainstream outlets actually tell the truth for once, it's kind of weird, right? Not used to that. And so lastly, found this one from the Jurist, legal news and commentary. So a very legal representation of the news, but again, published at 7:10 p.m. And so just highlights how much the media cares about wanting to spread positive awareness that cannabis is a medicine, mainly because, again, this isn't CNN, but we know that CNN, Fox, a lot of them, their advertising dollars comes from pharma. So pharma's not running those stories top of the day, middle of the week, Maybe one day. But with that, also we got an update from Don Murphy, so I wanted to share. Could be some safe banking passage from now until 420. I don't know, but let's give Don the floor.
Friends, Don Murphy from Capitol Hill, welcome back. Hope you all had a great holiday. I know you're going to have a great new year. Expectations are high that safe banking will become law this term.
Oh, yeah?
Certainly before the end of the year. It will likely be tucked into some must-pass legislation as an amendment and become law with relatively little fanfare. I think the big story is Schedule 3. It is, based on all accounts here, unlikely that the DEA would rule against the Biden administration's wishes during an election year. I don't believe for a second, and really no one does, that the DEA is going to do something contrary. It'd be one thing for HHS to do it, but now that the health department basically has said marijuana is medicine, the DEA is going to have a hard time fighting back against that. And there'll be very little pushback among Republicans as well. Marijuana as medicine is so 1990s. It's a shame that it's taken more than a generation for Capitol Hill to come along, but here we are. So anyway, you'll have a great weekend.
Y'all have a great weekend. And again, thank you, Don, for speaking up when you do. And I mean the work you've put in over time and the work you'll continue to do to help free this plant, eventually deschedule it. And so there were other investment snippet firms, but I didn't want to make this too long. If you did want to check out a few others, they might be buried on my Twitter page, but from Echelon on Cannabis, we estimate an average 110% increase to our 2024 unlevered free cash flow estimates if the 280E tax was removed, for a $660 million benefit across our 11 U.S. coverage names. And so a lot of finance talk for saying that the companies that we think are the favorites will keep a lot more profits and add it to their bottom lines once the DEA responds and then the actual action is taken and cannabis is removed from Schedule 1 and put into Schedule 3. Coming, folks. Soon! And so with that, from Marijuana Moment, medical cannabis is similarly effective as opioids for treating pain, but with fewer adverse events study finds. And so just figured I would share some studies that came along this week. Findings published in the journal BMJ Open come from a review of 90 randomized controlled trials comparing opioids, medical cannabis, and placebos. Together involved 22,000 participants, so a larger scale study that included cannabis. Love to see that. 84 of the trials were included in the report's qualitative analysis, and so our findings suggest that both opioids and cannabis for medical use may provide benefits for a minority of chronic pain patients, the study says. Furthermore, cannabis does not cause respiratory depression, which can result from opioid consumption and lead to non-fatal or fatal overdose, making it clear as day that one is far safer for the human body than the other. And so another one from NORML.org, twin study, lifetime cannabis exposure not linked to significant changes in mental health or other psychological outcomes. As of January 11th, out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, investigators affiliated with the University of Minnesota and University of Colorado assessed the long-term impacts of cannabis use on psychiatric and psychosocial outcomes in a sample of more than 4,000 adult twins. Subjects were assessed from 1994 to 2021. The study suggests that lifetime exposure to cannabis has few persistent effects on mental health and other psychosocial outcomes, researchers reported, which is very promising and in line with how I feel about my cannabis use over the years. And what a lot of the science backs up is that it's more of a medicine, and again, moderation is key for everything. We did not identify within pair differences in cognitive ability. Cannabis consumption did not predict within pair differences in psychoticism. Researchers caution that heavy cannabis use could elevate the risk of so-called cannabis use disorder. Of course, the habitual overuse of any substance will likely do that to you, while tobacco use and or experimentation with other controlled substances. They don't mention alcohol. Weird. I wonder why. And so pause to read if you're interested in any more of that. While links are all in the comments, but few more studies to highlight. And while I found this one, I thought it might have been in reference to the one that I featured in my last week's video, but it's actually a new study, apparently, finding the same things. That cannabis holds potential to prevent and reduce severity of COVID-19 while treating long-term symptoms, study finds. And so this is a new one out of Dalhousie University in Canada, carried out a comprehensive review of the scientific literature, publishing their findings about cannabis as a preventative therapeutic in the Journal of Clinical Medicine late last month. And so in further inspection, it seems like they looked at previous data and, of course, came to the conclusion that I and all of us can easily arrive at. The study found that cannabinoids have been shown to prevent viral entry, mitigate oxidative stress, and alleviate the associated cytokine storm of early infections. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read, otherwise full link in the comments. But again, more and more studies like this, we love to see them, and ideally these should be kind of blasted on mainstream outlets, because that's the kind of shit we do like. And with that, last one from Marijuana Moment colleges, and states that legalized cannabis see spike in applications from higher achieving students. Study finds because life's just better where cannabis is available freely, as opposed to where it's demonized and not. And so this is a study done by Emory University, shared via the conversation, we found that similar to how schools see a spike in applications and SAT scores when these schools have winning sports teams, schools see spikes when they are located in states that legalize cannabis. And this is just on top of other factors that we find out, like real estate valuations also going up, that just people don't know about. Ain't it fascinating that the more studies we actually take on, the more interesting data we find, as colleges saw a significant but short-term boost in applications from top-notch students, likely because the novelty does wear off once it's been legalized, and of course the more states that do it, less of a big deal it becomes. They also got more applications overall. So those were the key findings. More here if you wanted to pause to read. Well, I believe this is the last study, and I've shared this in past videos, but from another outlet highlighting what Canada has found, much like other states. Study finds cannabis legalization reduces access for minors. And so read it and weep. And imagine that. The prohibitionists are still going to double down, knowing they're in the wrong, thinking that they're doing the right thing. But hey, the road to hell is always paved with good intentions. They think they're doing the right thing. So more here if you wanted to pause to read if you weren't aware. But we love to see the fact that prohibition has been a farce all along. It's time to end the war on people. With that, for marijuana moment, states have expunged over 2.3 million cannabis records since 2018. Notice how you can't give much credit to the feds because it's just all been on the state level, state-led growth story, doing its thing in the shadows, in silence, NORML report shows. And so just happy to highlight many Americans, over 2 million of them, getting their lives back, primarily in California, Illinois, Missouri, New Jersey, New York, and Virginia, as they have been especially active and better at facilitating than a lot of other markets, I would imagine. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read. Otherwise, full link is in the comments. But with that, I think we've got some MSO stories now, or at least some developments. Green Market Report, that is right, as apparently there was a ruling, and then there were 8. Late Friday afternoon, as anything cannabis-related gets handled when no one's paying attention, apparently, which lasted less than 5 minutes, its 3 present members voted unanimously to approve the transition of 2 more cannabis multi-state operators to the rec market from the medical, bringing the total number of MSOs transitioning to 8. And does this lead you to believe that they're having to pay the $5 million? Probably not. They're just getting the ability to do what the other MSOs are also doing, and it's up to them to choose to pay the $5 million to actually start selling, which again seems ridiculous. And from my understanding, MSOs are just choosing to do wholesale in New York to the other dispensaries as opposed to pay the $5 million to actually sell legal rec cannabis out of one store when there's 8,000 illicit shops of competition. It would be nonsense. But congrats, Green Thumb and iAnthus. And so those are the details. Those 2 are now eligible to, again, I believe sell adult use if they want. But it's a steep price. And so I imagine that they're probably going to hold off like many of the other MSOs. Full link in the comments for that if you want to go through that. Well, thank you, Christopher Norman, our favorite source out of New Jersey. I'll put the document in the comments, but apparently Trulieve on January 17th, New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission's agenda for cultivation and processing licenses. And I do believe that this is Trulieve's first time, or would be their first time getting into New Jersey. So love to see them getting exposure in some of these new markets, competing with the other MSOs. While I think this is a sign that we have hit bottom, folks, because while we thank Jason G. Wild for being fearless and continuing to buy during these trying times as we move through uncharted waters, when Irwin Simon and Carl Merton start buying Tilray, Canadian LP, that's so fundamentally healthy. And you know what? I do apologize. I didn't even put their earnings in this video. Too many stories, or I should say better stories worth mentioning. But even though they're nibbling away, 20,000 shares at such a cheap price for Carl Merton, CFO, 53,700 for Irwin Simon. Regardless, they are buying. And so they likely know something that we don't. And they have reason to believe that DEA announcement is coming. And just to highlight that if you've been watching my channel for a long time, we know that there's been a lot of pressure on these retail stocks to sell off. And guess who's been the number 1 buyer today, or at least this is as of Friday, I believe. Thanks, Sammy J, for sharing this. One would assume MSOS on the healthy inflow, but it was actually CIBC, the algorithms. Amplifying Algo, I've previously pointed out, who was also number 1 buyer on the run to all-time highs, right? And so as much as they've been the force driving us down, ironically enough, they're going to be the force that takes us all the way back up too, most likely. And so let me know in the comments if you know more about this, or you want to just chime in what you think you know. But oh man, the year ahead could be so much fun. And so just wanted to verify with shortdata.ca. So let me just go back to the front of this. Larger short positions, CSE. It does look like as of December 31st, like some of the shorts know, and they've been scaling back some of their positions, it looks like. So, interesting. Just wanted to note that. But, of course, if you're paying attention to the market, we loved what we saw on Friday, and the fact that Monday, I believe, is a holiday in the U.S. Got some global updates before we end off. German medical cannabis associations call for wider regulatory reform. And so while we're anticipating the German government to finally do what they were supposed to do last year, which they failed to do because they're politicians and they suck, so they moved the goalposts, and now 420 is the timeline that we're looking at. At least German medical cannabis associations, keyword here, medical, are pushing for them to do what they said that they were going to do. And so let's hope that Germany does do something big alongside the U.S. on April 20th, 2024, because that would be epic. But the whole goal of this, of course, they're calling for reforms to reduce bureaucracy, very much needed in Western countries, and open up access for patients that have needed a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative for so long, especially when now the U.S. admits that they've always known it was medicine, and yes, it's damn effective, and my God, I can't wait till we just deschedule it and know more and more and more about it. Full links in the comment if you want to go through that. Well, 2024 cannabis industry forecast, federal, international, and finance. I'm going to go through this quickly and invite you to pause to read if you care to and if you're interested. But potential policy changes and 280E relief. Schedule 3 means 280E relief. That is the biggest thing, right? Of course. And so pause to read what some of these people have to say. A bit more here from Roger Wolodarski and Corey Parnell. Kai Kirk from Abby Kaufman. Oh, imagine that's like Andy Kaufman's daughter. Anthony Avalos from Finance and Market Landscape. Brett Gelfand. Jeremy Zachary, whoever these people are, I do not know. George Jage. So take these with a grain of salt, of course. Like as always, anything you read online. Douglas Fisher, Jordan Tritt, Summer Thomas, VP. That's a sweet name. International Cannabis Outlook, Alex Rogers, Nicholas Kouperanis. And that was a long one. Full link in the comments. Well, I got an update out of the Czech Republic, cannabis cafes and self-growing. Czechia presents a draft of new cannabis law. And so while I believe I saw an update like this a couple weeks ago, it seems like there's just more negotiations. But the fact that this is getting awareness in the press means that the talks are probably going to continue to move along, and hopefully they're going to have a positive outcome. All of this is sort of on the pretext of scientifically proven and balanced approach to risk prevention and harm reduction. And obviously the majority in the Czech Republic want access to cannabis. So main thing though, seems like it's still in talks and negotiations will continue. Discussion continues on wild-scale regulation. But I will update you once we actually get something definitive out of the Czech Republic, of course. But happy to relay that since 2018, man, it feels like it was yesterday almost. Wild. Canadians bought more than $16 billion worth of cannabis in first 5 years of legalization, and I've definitely put thousands of dollars into this. Pretty crazy to look back at this point, but highlighting from October 2018 to October 2023, and I would imagine a significant amount of the $16 billion came from 2020 to 2023, just because, as you can see here, the picture paints 1,000 words. But when you only open 25 to 50 stores in Ontario, our most populated province with 14 million people, you're going to get that stagnation. And it's only when they realize, shit, we need to open 120 a month to really supply the demand properly, then we get the growth. And so this is where we stand today. And Ontario just is a great case study to point out what New Jersey, New York, and some of these other markets will be, and why just legal stores allows money to go back into the legal market and strengthen the legal economy. And if it's redistributed properly and positively, man, can make a really big difference versus not opening stores. So many people are still just turning to the gray market, and that's where their money goes, right? It's common sense. It's all about the policy. And so lastly, not all great news from Thailand is the new government that came in recently got elected. Apparently, they want to ban cannabis for rec use. And so they're walking back the massive victory that Thailand got a few years back, although it's still going to be legal for medical, and I don't think cards are going to be required. And so as long as you just say, hey, it's for medical use, it seems to be like that could be a workaround. But the legislation is just trying to ban the whole recreational aspect of it. Very unfortunate for those in Thailand, and the cause of this is a new government coming into power after a recent election. But yeah, well, strictly for medical. The proposed legislation has not clarified whether a card is necessary. And so a lot of questions up in the air, and so it's just sad to see them walking back on this big win. I imagine if their tourist industry takes a hit, then they might consider rolling back this action. Who knows? But last two things I wanted to share, as again, I wasn't able to really dive deep through any of the documents, but I found a few snippets. One that is my only concern, just based on, for a while, you've certainly heard me harp on at some point about the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs of 1961, the bullshit UN treaty that basically stopped Germany from full-out legalizing, which highlights that for some silly reason, a UN treaty has more power than a nation's ability to delegate their own drug laws. And so maybe this is a nothing burger, but I do just want to play devil's advocate. As Logic Prevails pointed this out, and I saw it, and hey, imagine the DEA still tries something funny. Also, what was the rationale for including this footnote on the first page of the report? Of course, DEA understands its legal obligation. Why have to reiterate that like maybe the UN has the final say in this bullshit. So hopefully this is a nothing burger and it doesn't mean anything, but I did find this and just wanted to point it out because this is what got in the way of Germany, and you just never know what the DEA could end up saying despite all that yet. And why might the DEA do something snaky and shady last minute? Because they've done it before in 2016 most recently. But this time certainly does feel different, and we did not have the Schedule 3 recommendation from HHS. And so, for what it's worth, just wanted to thank you all for watching my channel, especially if you've been here for some time, because we know we're in the right. And, I mean, just wanted to highlight what this account says here. We are so early in the adoption of cannabis by the medical and recreational crowd, like so early. So, hey, be grateful we're aware before others. But hey, the main thing is that we've been right all along, and we're going to be on the right side of history, and that's just really nice to know. And so again, I thank you for sticking along with me and watching, because obviously you either have faith in the plant or you have experience with it and you know what it can do, and just a lot of propaganda and lies that we got to fight through to hope that cannabis sees light today and eventually gets descheduled. But all that to point out, page 29 is the most infuriating thing to read. These dudes have known for a century of its medical benefits and even gave testimony on it in 1937. And I believe it was still in the U.S. pharmacopoeia and removed in 1941 or 42 during the war when no one was paying attention, right? And so the first time they're admitting it again in decades, yet they still place cannabis in the most restrictive category, highlighting that the prohibitionists, it's all political science, it's wrong, and we got to make sure that we show them who's boss. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to try and address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it, subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and have a great long weekend. We'll catch you next week, and hopefully this momentum will continue. Take care, folks.